Welcome to Lecture 18, where we will go over the endocrine system. The posterior pituitary is responsible for producing and storing neurohormones for release. These include ADH, or antidiuretic hormone, which we've seen in the previous lecture, helps to increase water reabsorption and maintain blood osmolarity levels. The posterior pituitary also releases oxytocin. This controls milk secretion, uterine contractions during labor, and is also responsible for the development of maternal care behaviors, bonding, as well as sexual activity. The anterior pituitary is responsible for producing regulatory hormones. The anterior pituitary is controlled by inhibitory or releasing hormones from the hypothalamus. The anterior pituitary secretes FSH and TSH, follicle and thyroid stimulating hormones, ACTH, adrenocorticotropic hormone, MSH, melanocyte stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, and growth hormone. This diagram depicts the relationship of the hypothalamus anterior pituitary with respect to the hormones that it produces as well as the target organs. Portal veins will bring the hormones produced from the hypothalamus neurosecretory cells directly into the anterior pituitary gland. This will then stimulate the anterior pituitary gland to produce specific hormones, as listed below. Many of these hormones have what is termed a tropic or cascade effect in their target tissues. As a result, these hormones can be referred to as tropins. FSH and LH, for instance, are considered to be gonadotropins because they have a tropic effect on the gonadal tissue, such as the testes or the ovaries. TSH and ACTH are also considered to be tropic hormones. However, not all hormones released from the anterior pituitary are considered to be tropic. Prolactin and MSH are considered to be non-tropic hormones. Growth hormone has both tropic and non-tropic effects in their target tissues. The thyroid gland is another important gland in the body that produces thyroid hormone. Thyroid hormone is important in regulating bioenergetics, blood pressure, heart rate, muscle tone, digestive and reproductive functions. If thyroid hormones drop below a normal range, nerve impulses are sent to the neurosecretory cells in the hypothalamus. This will then cause the release of TRH, or thyrotropin releasing hormone. This will act on the anterior pituitary gland to secrete TSH, or thyroid stimulating hormone. Note that TSH is also known as thyrotropin. Once TSH is released, this will then travel into the bloodstream and act on the thyroid gland. This will cause the thyroid gland to secrete important thyroid hormones such as T3 and T4. This will then increase thyroid hormone levels back into the normal range. This involves a negative feedback loop. As the thyroid hormones are released, this will then decrease the production of TRH and TSH from the hypothalamus and anterior pituitary. This will prevent any overproduction of thyroid hormone. This diagram depicts the mechanisms involved in controlling the thyroid gland. When thyroid hormones drop, this acts as a stimulus on the neurosecretory cells in the hypothalamus. These neurosecretory cells will release TRH, or thyrotropin releasing hormone. This will then be carried to the anterior pituitary, which will cause the anterior pituitary gland to secrete TSH, or thyrotropin. This will circulate throughout the body to reach the thyroid gland. This hormone will then bind to receptors within the thyroid gland to cause the secretion of thyroid hormone T3 and T4. T3 and T4 are simply termed that way because they contain 3 or 4 iodine atoms. T3 and T4 are both derived from the amino acid tyrosine. If iodine isn't available, these hormones will remain low, thus preventing the negative feedback loop. As a result, TSH will constantly be secreted, which leads to the condition known as a goiter. This is very common in regions where seafood and salt are lacking, leading to an inavailability of iodine. If T3 and T4 are produced in normal amounts, this would then lead to the negative feedback loop, which will shut down the hypothalamus from secreting TRH and also shut down the anterior pituitary from secreting TSH. The process of growth is also regulated by the anterior pituitary. The anterior pituitary gland secretes growth hormone that stimulates growth. This will stimulate the liver specifically to release IGF or insulin-like growth factors. This is responsible for stimulating growth specifically in cartilage and bone tissue. The hypersecretion of growth hormone has been linked to gigantism, while the hyposecretion can lead to dwarfism. Endocrine glands play a very important role in regulating many biological processes such as homeostasis, development, as well as behavior. For instance, the adrenal hormones are produced by the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland sits on top of each kidney and consists of secretory cells that are in the adrenal cortex and neurosecretory cells that are in the adrenal medulla. In general, the adrenal gland becomes stimulated whenever any type of stress is encountered, and it is responsible for initiating the fight or flight response. Important hormones of the adrenal medulla include catecholamines such as epinephrine and norepinephrine, also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline. These hormones are responsible for increasing blood glucose levels, increasing heart and respiration rates, dilating the bronchioles, and diverting blood to the body core and skeletal muscles in preparation of the fight or flight response. The adrenal cortex, on the other hand, will release corticosteroids such as aldosterone or cortisol. These are also known as mineralocorticoid and glucocorticoid. These hormones are responsible in maintaining salt and water balance to promote the synthesis of glucose from fats and proteins. They are also involved in the suppression of the immune system. This diagram depicts the overall stress response in the body. When a stress is encountered, nerve impulses will then be transmitted to the spinal cord. This will also be transmitted through neurons to the adrenal medulla to cause the release of epinephrine and norepinephrine from the adrenal gland. In addition, stress will also stimulate the hypothalamus to release a hormone stimulating the anterior pituitary to secrete and release ACTH. This ACTH will then circulate in the bloodstream to then activate cells in the adrenal cortex. This will cause the release of mineralocorticoids as well as glucocorticoids. All in all, this will initiate the fight or flight response. Sex hormones are involved in regulating many processes in the body, such as growth, development, the regulation of sexual behavior, as well as reproductive cycles. Gonads produce three main types of hormones: androgens, estrogens, and progesterone. Recall, the main pathway involves the stimulation or activation of the hypothalamus gland, which causes the secretion of gonadotropin-releasing hormone. This will then cause the secretion of FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary, which will then stimulate the gonads to produce these hormones. Androgens in general play a role in biological sex determination during embryogenesis and also are involved in the development of secondary male characteristics during puberty. An example of an estrogen is testosterone, which you can see the structure below. Estrogens, on the other hand, play a role in maintaining the female reproductive system and are involved in the development of secondary female characteristics during puberty. An example of that is estradiol. Take a look at the similarity between these two structures. Note that they are very similar in structure, but yet have very different effects due to the specificity of the receptors and different pathways. Progesterone, on the other hand, prepares and maintains the mammalian uterus for fetal growth and development. Note that all of these are steroid-based, thus they have the same carbon ring structure. Testosterone and other anabolic steroids have widely been used in the athletic and bodybuilding community, as it's known to cause a significant increase in muscle mass. However, there are many adverse side effects that come along with taking steroids artificially. These include acne, liver damage, lower sperm counts, and decreased testicular size in males. now going to take a look at the role of these sex hormones during embryonic development. Note that when an embryo forms, whether it is XX or XY, both of these embryos have bipotential gonads. This means that they have gonads that can either differentiate into testes or ovaries depending upon the signaling pathways that it experiences during development. Also note the presence of two types of ducts, the Wolffian or male duct and the female or Mullerian duct. In males, the testes form and produce testosterone. This will cause the maturation of the vas deferens and the seminal vesicle. The testes also produce anti-Mullerian hormones. This will cause the degeneration of female ducts. In the absence of these hormones, you would get the persistence of female structures that would then develop into the oviduct, uterus, and vagina. This would then also lead to the production of estrogens, which would degenerate the male structures. Note that in the presence of testosterone, an anti-Mullerian hormone, you get the overall development of a male fetus. In the absence of the male hormones, you get the development of the female fetus. Endocrine disruptors are chemicals that are known to cause changes in normal hormone response pathways. An example is diethylstilbestrol. This was originally a synthetic estrogen that was prescribed to pregnant women in the 60s and 70s to prevent abortion, miscarriage, and premature labor. However, it was also known to later have effects on the reproductive development of the resultant fetus. Specifically, women that actually took DES had higher risks of miscarriage, while their offspring, if they did persist, had higher rates of reproductive abnormalities, limb abnormalities, as well as higher risks for both vaginal and cervical cancer. Many of these endocrine disruptors are also present in various types of drugs as well as within the environment. For instance, BPA or bisphenol A is a common chemical that is used in the manufacturing of plastics and resins that has been widely used since the 1960s. It is now commonly found in water bottles, baby bottles, food cans, hygiene products, and food containers. BPA is similar in its structure to estrogen and as a result can have estrogen-like effects in the body. BPA has now been shown to have adverse effects on reproductive systems, immune systems, and neurological systems. Also note that many products are now labeled BPA-free. However, they have simply swapped out BPA with other types of chemicals in the manufacturing process, such as BPS or BPF, bisphenol S or F. It is not known at this time whether or not these chemicals have similar effects or have no effect and are considered to be a safer alternative. Melatonin is an important hormone that is produced by the pineal gland in response to light patterns. It's important in controlling daily cycles such as sleep cycle, and also in regulating seasonal reproductive cycles. In this pathway, light-sensitive neurons that are present in the retina will transmit signals to the SCN or suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. This will then act on the pineal gland to regulate the release of melatonin. As daily light levels decrease, melatonin is produced and accumulates in the body. This will aid in the onset and maintenance of sleep. As light becomes present within the environment, melatonin levels will then drop. This will then allow for the onset of the wake cycle. During the course of evolution, we can also see that the function of a hormone can diversify across lineages. Thyroid hormone, for instance, is important in regulating metabolism. However, in frogs, T4 has an additional role. High levels of T4 can stimulate the resorption of the tail during metamorphosis. Thus, it has an important effect on the development of adult structures. Melanocyte-stimulating hormone, or MSH, can help regulate skin pigmentation in amphibians, fish, and reptiles. However, it also has an important role in regulating hunger as well as metabolism in mammals. And finally, we also have the diversification of the function of the hormone prolactin. Prolactin is a highly conserved hormone, which means it is present in a wide variety of lineages. The role of prolactin is important in controlling osmoregulation, metamorphosis, fat metabolism, reproduction and brooding behavior. However, in mammals, it now has the additional function of stimulating the development of the mammary gland, which is unique to mammals. It can regulate milk production as well as immune function and can also act as a growth factor by acting on the pancreas. Thus, prolactin is highly conserved, but yet has very diversified roles within various types of lineages and various types of organisms.